that Dory sent me the link to view just one of my favorite forms of content. I love to learn and I love to learn about people I admire. And it's rare that you get to talk to the people who are at the center of the doc. So before we get into my going on and on about how much I loved it and why I loved it, I guess maybe a great place to start would be Dory and Kenneth. Why this doc? Why now? How come this perfect artistic marriage happened in the way that it did? Can you share all of that, the origin story?
Everything,
Everything.
and leave nothing out, Dory.
You've nothing at. I'm hitting mute and I'll see you guys in an hour.
Right.
Yeah,
And you have 30 seconds, so take your time.
it's a sordid tale, boy. But it starts, I guess, with being in New York, uh, and being able to appreciate and take in and be in awe of the artistry of Kenneth Cole as a designer, and then also as really a maverick for social media before it was social media, when it was billboards and taxi cab tops and advertisements that were so clever and really made me think, and were about social change and the state of the world. And I was so moved and captured by those ads, and so followed Kenneth's career for a very long time. But as many roads do, the road that really, I think, launched the film in a way was theater, which I love, because Kenneth was, and his company, Kenneth Cole Productions, came on board as a major partner of ours on The Prom, which we had on Broadway. And it was an incredible opportunity for me to observe firsthand Kenneth's really fierce commitment to cause and his hands-on authenticity. And, he was so involved and cared deeply about the story we were telling. And that led to a conversation about what other work was underway with Kenneth. And he was talking about thinking about applying the work he had done with HIV/AIDS to using that blueprint for mental health and launching the Mental Health Coalition. And that just really was profound to me and an important story to capture. So we briefly talked about the possibility of doing that. And then, one thing led to another. And eventually we started I
Got
showed
to
up with
my
a camera.
Here you are.
Yeah, here we are.
I was telling someone, Kenneth, that you were coming on today, and I'm going to steal their quote. They were like, when everyone was running away from AIDS, Kenneth ran right toward it. And I want to go back that far because I think it set the blueprint for a really beautiful life, where you were able to meld your passion for design and your passion for doing the right thing and using a platform to do so. Um, and so, as far as I know, I'm sure there may have been other causes before AMFAR and your activism that, even as a young person, like where did that start? Your understanding, I have a voice, I need to use it and not be afraid. Can you go back in time and sort of talk about the instinct for that?
So, it's a good question. I've pondered that a lot too. The fashion business is a hard business, and when I started the business, um, it was a while ago, and I knew and that somehow people would say, I knew somehow I was going to make it work. People, um, when people would ponder what would challenge me and say, what would you have done if it didn't? And you walked away from what was, you were in a family business and you put so much at stake and you put yourself out there. And I said, and I would say to them, I knew it would work, but what I don't say to them usually, I don't qualify that statement in the fact that I didn't know what it was, and I knew I'd figure it out along the way, and it would require my being present in the moment and having a sense of not necessarily what people stand in, but what they stand for, and which ultimately will determine what they're going to stand in, and not just what they was on their body, but was on their mind, which ultimately would influence what was going to be on their body and everything else. So my business, I started the business when I was young, and I'm still young, but
Younger. We
a
just say
little
younger.
a little less naive.
Yeah.
And then and I knew that I would continue to figure it out, and I'm still focused every day on figuring it out. And I think everything is changing so fast. We just had a conversation a few minutes ago about AI and how there's nothing we're doing that resembles what we were doing. We're not doing it the way we were doing it because of the various context that gets redefined. But so in the fashion business, in any case, it's very fast moving. Fashion by definition isn't the same for you as it is for me, and it invariably won't be the same for you tomorrow as it is today. So, and I knew that I needed to make this, and I knew I needed to connect with you in a more meaningful way for the business to be sustainable, because there's no way I'm going to get it right all the time, and I needed to know what people wanted, and then figure out how to give it to them and deliver it in a way that they don't quite expect.
Right.
But so that's kind of what it did. So, and there's a very delicate balance between relevance and viability, both the man and the brand, and I'm trying to balance all of it all the time. And there was only so many pharmacologists available at the time, and so but I was going to figure it out, and I was going to figure it out every day, and every day I continued to kind of rethink, recalibrate, and recoordinate what we're doing and why and how. And so I the goal is to make the business meaningful. And I realized early on, we were very lucky early on. We had with the trailer story, which if you haven't seen the film, you should. I guess it's a real, only in America, real entrepreneurial story. And
Do you want to talk a little bit about it, just to allow people into the rock and roll sort of way your brain worked?
I only if you think they're adequately and appropriately medicated. But so I think that let me get to that in a second. So I knew that I knew somehow that I needed to figure this out, and I needed to get into business quickly. And all right, I'll tell you the story real quickly. So I had only a little bit of money. I knew I had even less time, because businesses, 60, 70, 80% of new businesses fail the first year because people run out of time, or they run out of resources, run out of money, or run out of time in order to have a return on their resources. So I needed to have a collection for the upcoming shoe show, because I wanted to be in the women's shoe business. And I knew I had a better chance of getting credit from an Italian shoe factory that needed business than from an American bank that didn't. So I ran to Italy, introduced myself, met a few people, convinced a few people that it was in their interest to support me, and I interned them. And I designed the cool line of lady shoes, came back, I had to sell it. I had a short window of time, figure that out. And there were two choices. You take a room at the Hilton Hotel, and 1,100 companies did that, and there was like 30 floors, 30 some odd companies per floor, and then buyers walked every floor, or you take a big fancy showroom within a 2-block radius of the Hilton Hotel. Truthfully, I need neither the money or the time to do either. So on a whim, called a friend in the trucking business, if I can figure out how to park one of your 40-foot trailers on the corner of 6th Avenue and 56th Street during the shoe show on December 2nd, would you lend it to me? He said, sure, jerk. You can't park a bicycle for 10 minutes, let alone a truck for 3 days. And I said, if I can figure it out, will you lend it to me? He says, if you can figure it out, I'll help you decorate it. So I called the mayor's office, Mayor Koch. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, how does one get permission to park a 40-foot trailer on the corner of 6th Avenue, 56th Street? And the answer is, sorry, son, they don't. This is New York. We get permission only under 2 circumstances. If you're a utility company or a production company shooting a full-length motion picture, because we were going through an I Love New York campaign then, we probably still are today. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hung up the phone. It wasn't really him, but it was somebody in his office. And I went to a stationery store that afternoon, changed the letterhead from Kenneth Cole Inc. to Kenneth Cole Productions Inc. Filed for a permit the following morning with the mayor's office for permission to shoot a full-length motion picture called The Birth of a Shoe Company. We opened for business a few weeks later on December 2nd, right in front of 1376th Avenue, which is where all the fancy shoe companies were. And and hired a director. Sometimes there was film in his camera, sometimes there wasn't. And we saw every buyer in New York within 3 days. The more important they were, the longer we had them wait. And we sold 40,000 pair of shoes after 2.5 days. And we literally got our foot in the door and we were off and running. So, and we made a lot of money the first year in business. And I realized that this needs to be about more than money, and it can be about more than money. And if it's going to really be sustainable, I'm going to engage associates emotionally and physically the way I am. They need to somehow be all in, and the same thing with every other aspect. So I set out to make this about more than just how much money we can make, and how do we make it more meaningful, and how do we connect more with people in a more meaningful way. And we look back today, I was talking to an HR executive recently, and they said that our retention rate is 100% higher than anybody else's they know. And it's because people just, it's more of a all-in commitment when you work here, because we've got a business, a business with real P&L and accountability, but everybody in the business touches social impact. It's not something that we do here as part of who we are, and everybody feels the fulfillment that comes with that. And then we have the 501c3, the business not-for-profit in the same building, the Mental Health Coalition, and they all have very clear business deliverables, and they've got goals, objectives, and transparent, quantifiable goals, and the impact has to be real. And so, and it's been very meaningful, and I spend probably more of my time these days on social impact than I do on fashion.
How did you decide? I don't know if you've been approached over the years to be part of a documentary, whether it was just focused on you or other entrepreneurs who also put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. How did you decide this was the time and Dori was the person to direct it and produce it?
I'd spoken to other people over the years. I just felt I trusted Dori. I trusted her instincts. I trusted her commitment and her integrity, and I thought that she'd do a good job. I mean, it's the only time I've ever committed to a creative project without any oversight capability. So
I wanted to know, how much did you just let go for this?
I
And
had no choice, and it was very hard.
let
I saw the film in its entirety for the first time in front of an audience, and I was only under the seat about half the time, the seat in front of me. So I guess I was a little bit more adept and comfortable than I was prepared to be, than I thought I'd be. And it wasn't the film I thought Dori was going to make. I thought it was going to be more of a fashion film, but it's the film I'm glad she made.
Dori, can you speak to that? Did you have a specific pitch when you talked to Ken, or was it an organic, like a conversation that happened organically, and suddenly there you were shooting?
Well, I think it did happen organically because it came out of social impact. It came out of conversation about art and social impact. So, I think given that we had been collaborating on the prom, and it was a very, a joyous experience, but also very purposeful. I think that was the mindset going into the film, and that what I was excited about, what Kenneth knew I was excited about, is, obviously, the business that he built is extraordinary and fuels a lot of the impact work. And it was really fascinating to me, the fusion of cause and commerce. And we had talked about that, and talked about how the platform that he had built with such, that was so magnificent was also enabling a lot of this incredible work that was changing people's lives all over the world. So, I think that that was always for me, not that I wouldn't want to make just a fashion doc about Kenneth, there's just so much to tell. And in fact, the biggest challenge of the film was it not being like an 8-part TV series. There was just
I
so
know I'm
much.
kind of bummed that it isn't, to be honest, because I feel like I mean, they're not mutually exclusive. Anyway, I just want to say if we can write in like some sort of campaign, I think we need more. I feel like it's impossible. You did almost the impossible, but we know as viewers that that is like the tip of the iceberg. So that would be really fun. And Kenneth, now that you know you can handle watching yourself, we can do an 8-parter. Agreed?
There's a lot more of this story that can be told, and I'm
Yeah.
not sure how much um, people have to tolerance and interest in wanting to hear. But it's everything that went into making what this is. There's so many other versions of it that manifest itself in very different aspects. And
I
um,
want to get granular for a minute and forgive me, but what you have done is quite original. And there's this incredible reveal as we go through the doc that you actually and it catches us by surprise that you would actually come from a family that was in the shoe business, right? And so the idea that you could have stayed and figured out how to do what you do within, I mean, every family has its own dynamic. And I love seeing how much your family, Kenneth Cole, is really involved in the day-to-day of the Kenneth Cole mission, which it's a beautiful thing to have. I don't know, to just see you and your daughter together. It's beautiful. And I just want to say bravo. Good parenting and good shoes. Those are not always, they can be mutually exclusive. And maybe they were in your family, which is why you didn't stay in the family business. Who knows? But when you decided to go out on your own, I wore candies, by the way. They were really a big thing in my high school life. I'm aging myself. I keep
that was very risque, by the way.
of course I mean they were kind of like I mean I think my mom called them hooker shoes and I was like now I'm getting another pair. Like it was very exciting.
Right.
But the idea, I just want to go back. Who were there people at the beginning? Sometimes, as singers, we start by copying how people we love sing, and then suddenly we find our own voice, right? But we start by mimicking. Was there anyone in the world mentoring you or inspiring you? It didn't even have to be in fashion, but you saw what they were doing on another platform completely, and you were like, I'm starving for that. I'm going to find my version of that.
You know, I was always kind of aware and conscious of how people built brands. I mean, you can create great products, but at the end of the day, it needs to kind of tell a cohesive story, and that's what makes it a brand. And so I was very conscious of how people like Calvin and Ralph um, and Armani, who passed away recently, and I
Yeah.
to look at him a lot, and how they built collections, how they told their stories, and and uh, and trying to figure out how to learn from that and do what we did in a way that they weren't and no one has, and arguably probably no one could or should. Um, so uh, we created. When I started the business a little over 40 years ago, fashion was really, up until that point, it had emanated from the runways in Paris and Milan, and then all of a sudden it was started to come from the streets, and it was kind of a whole different moment in time. And so, I had this unique opportunity to introduce ourselves in a different way, and then as I started to connect it to these various non-fashion messages and initiatives. I always wondered how this was ultimately going to process and manifest itself, and if it was sustainable over time. And it became apparent that it wasn't. It was, and I was dead on focus on talking about what was on people's minds and not just what was on their bodies, and not, what people would invariably gravitate to. And um and I never took what we did seriously. I mean, I take the world seriously. I don't take what we do seriously. And one of the first tabloid-esque ads that I ran in the mid 80s was, if you all remember, Imelda Marcos and the kind of craziness the tabloids had with her shoe
Her
wardrobe.
shoe collection. Yeah.
So I ran an ad which said, if Imelda Marcos truly bought 2,700 pair of shoes, she could have at least had the courtesy to buy a pair of mine. And she had New York Magazine had just published, somebody had gotten access to her closet and they published all the brands that were there. And there was one that was missing. So, and I felt, why not make a point of that? So, but again, it was self-deprecating in effect. It was acknowledging kind of a little bit of the lunacy that we all wrap ourselves in and around, and then at the same time, not taking ourselves very seriously.
Can we go back to my friend's comment about when the world was very scared to even utter the words HIV, you leaned in so deeply and with such passion, to highlighting it, to creating awareness for it. Often people get very invested in something because it starts out personal and then it sort of spreads out from there. Was this personal?
It wasn't, but it became personal.
Okay.
Originally, it was an opportunity to talk about something that nobody was talking about. And I realized it was easier for me to do it than it was for most, because I wasn't in one of the at-risk communities. I wasn't an intravenous drug user. I wasn't Haitian, and I wasn't a gay man living in New York in the fashion business. And the stigma attached to those groups was overwhelming and paralyzing in many ways. And it was this ominous black cloud that was lurking everywhere, but everybody knew it was there, but no one wanted to talk. It was on everybody's minds, but nobody's lips. And I didn't get it. I realized afterwards why it was, in fact, something that most people were shying away from. And I didn't really understand the aspect of stigma until a little bit later on in this journey. But I figured this is something I should talk about because few are, and I don't know why. And then it became personal, and I had somebody working for me, David Brugnoli, who actually designed that trailer and our first offices. And David was a gay man, and David had all these welts all over his body. One afternoon, I asked him, as he had them tested, does he know what it is? And he chose to ignore it at first. And then I pushed a little harder, and he said, I asked if he knew what it was. He said, no. I said, why don't you get it tested? He says, to what end? If you are presumed to have HIV, the virus for AIDS, then you would be ostracized from every community that you knew, and you stood to lose your friends, your employment, your relatives. People often distance themselves. We lived through a devastating pandemic recently around the world, but certainly here at home in the name of COVID, which was amazingly contagious, but and way more contagious than HIV, but nowhere near as lethal. And I think 6 million people died worldwide from COVID. I think the statistics I'd heard at one point, 40 million have already died from AIDS, and there's another 40 million that are living with it. And if they don't get their regimen of protocols of antiretrovirals, they will die as well. So, but yet people couldn't talk about it. So this was an opportunity to say something that few were. Arguably, maybe we couldn't, maybe we shouldn't. And then I was asked to join the board of AmFAR. And it became that much more meaningful when I got it to. And then we as a company, even before that, started doing a lot of AmFAR's branding, marketing, and communications. So everybody here was getting involved in it. And everything all of a sudden felt more meaningful. And what we did felt more significant and more purposeful. And And it changed, and as I say in the film, it changed. The man changed the brand, changed the company quickly.
Yeah. And gun control and now mental health. I guess I want to ask for people listening, Dori, you mentioned that the way you connected with Kenneth was you were doing the musical The Prom, and you can tell listeners, the few who I might have who don't know what the focus of that musical was.
Both of them.
The two people who don't love musicals, you can stop listening now, you two. What does that look like? Like, we all know and admire, if you go down the West Side Highway and you're not New York if you don't see some unbelievably hilarious, double entendre, smart way of looking at something. And you're like, how did they come up with another one at Kenneth Cole? It's sort of mind boggling that you can do this for 40 years and not run out of hilarious ways to make us think about things anew. But when someone like you who admired, and Dory, you're such a success in your own right, somehow you're introduced to Kenneth Cole, and he's going to come on and his company is going to come on to help support the mission of the sentiment at the center of the prom. What does that look like? Like, you've gotten to have this experience.
It was multifaceted. It was ranged from an ad campaign with our cast that featured all the leads, but also very much it's a story about these two girls who want to go to the prom together, and they are prevented from doing so. Unfortunately, in the world we're living in, that happens all the time. And so the ad campaign, then we Kenneth also designed a pair of shoes that were worn by the cast in the show, which was tremendous. And there were so many other things along the way in support for the show. In particular, Kenneth threw a wonderful dinner for a lot of people involved in the show, and it was at that dinner that we were talking about the possible, what was going on with the Mental Health Coalition, and the first time we talked about capturing some of the work he was doing. So
That ended up being a film, the doc.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I think that there are companies that are involved in supportive of, and they mean so much. We appreciate whether it's a Broadway show or a film or whatever, they appreciate the support, but the level of commitment and the authenticity and the in the trenches work done by the entire team was just mind-blowing. It was so exciting and impressive, and just as much as I already admired Kenneth and the work that he had done and the company had done over all those years, it made it even deeper.
So I have a question. Mental health, the Mental Health Coalition. I mean, I'm sure there are days you feel like Sisyphus in the world right now, because it is, I mean, the words mental health, I mean, even that, it's so broad and it's so intrusive in every aspect of every human being's life right now. I think about having children, I think about phones, I think about all of these apps that are sort of really hurting young people in ways that, I feel fortunate to have been older. I had other things that traumatized me. It wasn't something I carried around all day in my hand. Um, I know that there must be, like an octopus, there must be so many things that this organization is doing. But can you, just to kind of get a little granular, like, let's get micro, like today, right now, what are you sort of focused on? Because it's such a beast. So how do you take it piece by piece, bit by bit?
So first of all, you should know that we have the coalition. It consists of 50 of the largest, uh, most important service providers, mental health service providers in the country, and
Mhm.
cross functionally, and they represent most of the disproportionately impacted communities. So, and we have meetings all the time, and invariably, I'm the least qualified person at every table I sit at to be having the conversation we're having. But I'm very qualified and very capable of convening people who are, in fact, extraordinarily qualified. So and and I do believe that if you can create a mechanism of where um, you can engage people as a group collectively, the collective output is significantly going to over-index on anything you're going to do individually. I love, there's an old African proverb that, oh, together you can go far. Together, alone you go fast, together you go far. So how do you bring together? And you got all these great resources, well-intended resources, and that are competing with each other, tripping over each other, and they've never sat next to each other.
Right.
So and so we were very effective in convening a very enthusiastic industry of organizations that are able now to, we hope to look to give them a platform they didn't have, voices arguably that maybe they might not have had, and mental health, to finish where I started before, as bad as HIV was, and as bad as COVID is, arguably, I believe more people have died from mental health related illnesses, such as suicide and self-harm and suicide than either of the other two. And it's growing exponentially. So I we're very focused on ending the stigma, because I do think, because we can, and that is something I believe qualified to do. And people ask, what are you, why are you doing this? You're not a psychiatrist, you're not a public health person, you're not a mental health person. But I do feel stigma, which is was at the root of HIV, and is at the root of mental health, mental illness,
Right.
is about perception, and which infuses hate, which infuses distancing, oneself from so many, and I do believe in many ways that I am as much of an authority on perception as many, and I'm in the perception business. So that is, I think, the lens through which we look at a lot of this, and I do believe we're going to change. We're going to end the debilitating stigma that surrounds all of mental health. That's our goal. And by convening this unique coalition, we're going to do things nobody else could have done or would have done. We also have a tech aspect to what we do, which we do talk about in the film as well. And tech has been vilified, in some cases justifiably, in many, I think, not. And these guys were all brought on. They're very successful engineers, marketing executives, business people, and they were hired to connect people everywhere, to infuse an element of creativity and impact that never could have otherwise. And if you look at the mission and the vision of Meta and Facebook and Instagram, and it's all about building community, connecting people everywhere. There's nothing there about doing it in a healthy way, doing it in a
Right.
and that all realistically can and will, I do believe, be addressed. But they've all, again, accomplished what they're hired to do, and they've got not just stakeholders, they've got shareholders. And so how do you address their current circumstances respectfully, at the same time influence, hopefully, a transformation to a way that's where they can accomplish a lot of that, but do it in a healthier, more realistic and appropriate way. So that's what we've set out to do. They don't have NDAs with each other because none of them trust each other. Many of them have with us. We're the honest broker in the room, and we launched what was called SOS, Safe Online Standards. We're in the process of launching it with Meta, with TikTok, with Snap, with most of the platforms, and everybody's well intended, but they don't want to. They can't self-regulate. They're insistent on doing this as a community, and they're fine if the pie gets smaller. They just don't want to lose their share of that pie. And I get that too, because as a business person. So I think we're going to make significant impact. There's no solution to mental health that's scalable that doesn't include them, in my mind. And so, and I think they're all willing and desirous of being part of the solution. And our goal is to help articulate it and enable it, and support it.
You must wake up really grateful to be you.
I would have been fine being you, by the way, but you weren't available. So
AI can take care of that. I want to let you guys go. There's so much going on in both your lives, and I hope maybe we can continue to have this conversation in the future and follow up on sort of all the incredible things that you're doing. I just have to say, I loved this movie. As I said earlier, I love documentaries, but this was so satisfying because we got so much of a message that we took home with us and can implement into our own lives, even in a smaller scale. The real takeaway is doing more makes your life better. I don't know if this was in the film, but sort of the secret of being someone who is an activist is selfishly how much you get out of it, and as well as feeling obviously when you can see the impact in front of you, that's wonderful. But really, like, it must be a wonderful feeling for both of you to get up every day knowing that you have a mission and a reason beyond commerce. Like, you can really see it, and the passion with which this film is made, and the intoxicating feeling when you're done watching, that you go, how can I be a part of this? How can I be a part of the change? That's what you want from a documentary, unless it's true crime, and then you don't want to be a part of that, but you do want to be a part of this particular story. So I just have to say to Dori and Kenneth, thank you for making this movie. Thank you for teaching us how we can do more and do better. Before I let you go, by the way, it's called A Man with Soul: The Impact of Kenneth Cole. Just it's starting to be everywhere. You'll find it. Just keep Googling and see how you can watch it. Um, is there a little known fact about you, Kenneth Cole, that you can share that you haven't yet?
so I mean, the first one that comes to mind is one I think it's in the film too. So if you haven't, it is that my first job was selling peanuts to Shea Stadium. But and that was in the spirit of doing what I love and finding a way to make what I do, what I love, part of what I do, and in the day, and then life becomes much easier and less complicated.
Dori, you knew
Oh
it
my
was
goodness.
coming, girl.
Well, I think it's a tie between, being very focused now on figuring out the musical adaptation of A Man with Soul. And we were talking last night, and I think, we're narrowing the focus to George Clooney to star, and I think that could be great. So,
You
but don't
said a
tell anybody. This
musical.
is a musical adaptation of the documentary. Yeah, don't tell anybody. Yeah, I
Not
think that's
Ryan Reynolds. I feel like maybe I'm seeing Ryan Reynolds.
could be.
Oh,
Well,
you want George.
I think we'll start with George, and
Okay, fair.
yeah.
So
So that's really the secret.
That's the little known fact. If
Mhm.
there are any two people who can get him in a musical, I am 100% sure it's you. I want to thank you both for being on the podcast today. This was such joy for me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thanks for coming on.
thanks,
Thanks so
Alana.
much,
Great to
Alana. I
see you.
love your
Much
podcast so much.
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Of course. Bye.
Okay,
Mwah.
bye bye. All the
Bye.
best.